There are things that look like love but aren't. That's what I keep coming back to even now. The way something can be wrapped so carefully, handed to you with both hands and a smile, and still be the most dangerous thing you've ever accepted. I'm 63 years old. I worked 31 years as a civil engineer for the city of Edmonton. I have a house on a quiet street in Sherwood Park that I've owned outright since 2019. I have a pension and RRSP I've been contributing to since I was 28, and a second savings account I opened specifically to help my wife and me travel once I retired. I tell you all of this not to brag. I tell you because what happened to me had everything to do with what I had, and nothing to do with who I was. My wife, I'll call her my wife, because that's what she is and what she's chosen to remain through all of this. She had a daughter from her first marriage. Her name is Nadine. Nadine was 31 when this story starts. She had a boyfriend named Curtis who she'd been with for about 4 years. He worked in sales, leased a truck he couldn't afford, and had the kind of confidence that fills a room before the rest of him does. I'd never fully warmed to Nadine, and I want to be honest about that. It's not that she was cruel to me. She wasn't. She was polite the way someone is polite when they want something. Friendly, but never warm. She remembered my birthday every year, always called me by my first name, Walter, even though I'd told her early on that she could call me whatever felt comfortable. She always chose Walter. There was a distance in it. My wife had 2 grown children from her first marriage, Nadine and a son who lives out in Victoria. He's always been straightforward, easy. Nadine was the one my wife worried about. She didn't say it often, but I could tell. The way she'd change her voice on the phone when Nadine called, a little softer, a little more careful. None of that is a crime. I want to be fair. It was a Thursday in late November when Nadine called to say she was coming to visit for my birthday weekend. I turned 63 on the Saturday. My wife was thrilled. She loves when her daughter visits. They have a bond I've never tried to interrupt. I cleaned the guest room, picked up some groceries, made sure the house was warm. Edmonton in November is not forgiving. There was already a foot of snow on the ground, and the forecast wasn't improving. Nadine arrived Friday evening with Curtis. They brought wine, a cheese board, and a gift bag with silver tissue paper. We had dinner. Curtis talked a lot about a deal he was working on. Nadine kept touching her mother's arm, laughing at things that weren't quite funny, filling silences before they could settle. I sat at my own dining table and watched it all and thought, this is a nice evening. After dinner, Nadine handed me the gift bag. Inside was a set of wireless earbuds, premium ones. The kind that would have cost, I'm guessing, $300 or more. Black case, magnetic close, little card inside explaining the features. She'd even already charged them. For your commute, she said, then caught herself. Or, well, for your walks. I know you still do your morning walks. I thanked her. I meant it. I thought it was a generous, thoughtful gift. I put them in the case and set them on the kitchen counter. My wife hugged her daughter. Curtis poured more wine. The weekend passed without incident. Nadine and Curtis left Sunday afternoon. I stood at the front door and watched the car pull out of the driveway, and I felt nothing except the ordinary flatness of a visit ending. The house settled back into its usual quiet. Monday morning, I wore the earbuds on my walk. They were good. Clear sound, comfortable fit. I listened to a podcast I like about infrastructure and urban planning, which I realize is not everyone's idea of entertainment, but that's me. I wore them again Tuesday. By Wednesday, I'd started bringing them to work. I'd taken on a part-time consultant contract after retiring from the city, 2 days a week at an engineering firm in the Southwest End. I liked having somewhere to be. My wife is a reading teacher with the school board and works full days, and I found early retirement lonelier than I expected. The consulting kept my mind moving. It was a Wednesday morning when my colleague Dennis first noticed them. Dennis is younger than me by about 12 years. He's one of those people who knows a little about everything and genuinely enjoys knowing it. Electrical systems, audio equipment, whatever you put in front of him. He leaned over my desk and pointed at the earbud case sitting next to my coffee. "New," he said. "Birthday gift," I said. He picked up the case, which I didn't mind because Dennis is a kind of person who handles things carefully. He turned it over, looked at the model number on the back, set it down, picked up one of the earbuds, held it between two fingers and examined it. Then he went still in a way I noticed. "Can I see your phone?" he said. "Sure." He opened the Bluetooth settings, looked at the pairing, looked at the earbud again. There was something happening on his face that I couldn't immediately read. "Walter," he said slowly, "these have been open." "What do you mean?" "The casing. Someone's been inside this." He set the earbud down on the desk with the care of someone setting down something that might break or might bite. "There's a component in here that shouldn't be here." I looked at him. I didn't understand. "You think something's wrong with them?" He looked at me with an expression I will not forget, measured, careful. Like he was deciding how to say something that couldn't be unsaid. "I think you should call the police," he said quietly, "before you touch anything else." I remember the sound of the office behind us, someone's chair rolling, the printer running in the next room. I remember thinking he must be overreacting. I remember thinking, this is absurd. These are earbuds my stepdaughter gave me for my birthday. And then I looked at his face again, and I stopped thinking that. I didn't react visibly. I'm not someone who falls apart in front of people. It's just not how I'm built. I asked Dennis to wait. I went to the washroom, stood at the sink, ran cold water over my wrists the way my father used to tell me to do when I was overwhelmed. I looked at myself in the mirror, 63 years old, 31 years of work, a house I own, a pension I earned. What would have happened, I kept thinking, if Dennis had never picked them up? I called the non-emergency police line from my car in the parking garage. They sent 2 officers to the office that afternoon. Dennis explained what he'd found. The officers bagged the earbuds as evidence and asked me a series of questions I hadn't expected. Who gave these to you? When? Was there anyone who had expressed interest in your finances, your property, your health? Was there anyone who had suggested you were struggling, forgetting things, not managing well? That last one landed differently. Because yes, now that you're asking, yes. Over the past 4 or 5 months, Nadine had been saying things, small things. She'd mentioned twice that I seemed tired. She'd made a comment at Thanksgiving about how big the house was for just 2 people. Said it while looking at the dining room as if she were already measuring it for something else. She'd asked my wife in front of me whether I was keeping up with the bills okay, and when my wife said of course, Nadine had made a sound that I'd filed away without examining. She'd also, I now realized, asked me twice about my will, both times framed lightly. "Just making sure things are in order, Walter, just being practical." I'd said yes, we have a will, and moved on. I hadn't thought about it again, but now I was thinking about it. I called our family lawyer that same evening. Her name is Bernadette, and she's been handling our legal matters for nearly a decade. I explained the situation. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Walter, has anyone approached you or your wife about any kind of legal arrangement involving your assets or your capacity?" I said I didn't think so. She said, "I'm going to look into something. Can you come in Thursday?" Thursday, I sat across from Bernadette in her office on Jasper Avenue. She had a printed document on the desk in front of her. She slid it toward me slowly. It was an application, incomplete, not yet filed, but clearly in progress. An application for a representation agreement under the Alberta Adult Guardianship and Trusteeship Act. The applicant was listed as Nadine. The person whose capacity was being questioned was listed as me. I sat with that for what felt like a long time, but was probably 30 seconds. There was a window behind Bernadette's desk that looked out over the river valley. I stared at it. The sky was white and heavy with coming snow. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "I have contacts," she said simply. It hadn't been filed, but it was being prepared by a paralegal firm in St. Albert. There was a legal theory being constructed around me without my knowledge. without my consent, and without any actual evidence of incapacity. Nadine's plan, as best as Bernadette could piece together, was to establish that I was showing signs of cognitive decline, present herself as acting in my best interests, and gain legal authority over my financial decisions, which would include my bank accounts, my pension, my house. She was 31 years old. She lived in a rented apartment in Leduc and drove a car that was 2 payments behind. She had access to Curtis, who I imagine was the one who'd sourced the modified earbuds, probably through someone neither of us would ever be able to fully trace. The earbuds, Bernadette explained, were likely intended to capture conversations in my home. Evidence of confusion, moments of forgetfulness, anything that could be assembled into a portrait of a man losing his grip. I went home that evening, and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time before my wife got back from school. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that used to feel like peace and now felt like something I'd been sharing with a stranger I hadn't known was there. When my wife came in, she found me at the table with a cup of tea gone cold. She sat down across from me. She's a perceptive woman. She knew immediately something had happened. I told her everything. All of it. The earbuds, Dennis, the lawyer, the application. I watched her face as I talked. I want to be clear, I saw no recognition in it. I saw shock, then pain, then something quietly shattering behind her eyes when I said her daughter's name. She is not a woman who cries easily, and she didn't cry then, but she held very still in the way she does when she's holding something inside that's too large to let out at the table. She said, "I didn't know." I believed her. I still believe her. That was a choice I made deliberately, to look at 30 years of knowing someone and to trust what I knew. Could I be wrong? I don't know, but I'm not willing to lose my marriage to my stepdaughter's plan as well. The police executed a search of Nadine and Curtis's apartment 11 days after I first called them. I won't pretend I know all the details of how that came together. Bernadette was involved, the evidence from the earbuds, something Dennis provided in a technical statement. What I know is that on a Tuesday in mid-December, just before 8 in the morning, officers knocked on Nadine's door. She called her mother from the police station. My wife answered. I was standing close enough to hear the tinny sound of Nadine's voice on the other end of the line, though not the words. My wife listened for about 40 seconds, and then she said quietly and without drama, "I need you to find a lawyer, Nadine. Don't call this number again tonight." She hung up. She set the phone down on the counter. She looked at me, and then she looked away, out the window at the street, at the snow that was coming down again. In Canada, the adult guardianship legislation is meant to protect vulnerable people. That's the intent. What it means in practice is that the bar for initiating an application is lower than most people realize. You don't need to prove someone is incapacitated. You just need to create enough of a record to suggest it might be the case. Nadine was building that record. The earbuds were for audio. We later learned from the police that Curtis had also done research into hidden cameras disguised as household objects. They hadn't gotten that far. The earbuds were step 1. What I want to say about Dennis is this. He picked up something that wasn't his and looked at it more closely than most people would. He didn't assume. He didn't dismiss. He saw something that didn't belong, and he said something quietly to me in an office where nobody else was paying attention. That's the thing that undid all of it. One person deciding to look carefully. I changed my passwords. All of them. I updated my banking information with the branch and added security questions only I would know the answers to. Bernadette reviewed our wills and added language that makes any future capacity claim more difficult to leverage. I added a line item to our household budget that goes every month into a separate account my wife doesn't know the number for. Not because I don't trust her, but because Bernadette said it was wise to have something that couldn't be swept up in any future legal action involving shared assets. Nadine was charged. I won't list the charges because I don't want to get ahead of what the court will decide. Curtis was charged separately. As of the time I'm telling you this, both matters are still before the courts. My wife and her daughter have not spoken since December. I did not ask for that. I would not have asked for it. My wife made that decision herself, and she made it calmly and without consulting me, which I think says something about her that I hadn't fully seen before. She's stronger than I sometimes give her credit for. I still do my morning walks. I use a different pair of earbuds now, ones I bought myself, still in the box when I opened them, sealed the way they're supposed to be. I listen to my infrastructure podcast. I walk the same streets in the dark before the sun comes up, past the same houses with their porch lights on, past the bus stop where the same woman waits every Tuesday with the same red coat. Everything looks the same. But I look more carefully now, not with fear, I don't want to live with fear, but with attention, the way Dennis looked at those earbuds, the way Bernadette read that document before she said a word. There's a version of this story where I never said anything to anyone, where I wore those earbuds every morning, in my own home, on my walks, at the office, and slowly a picture was assembled of a man who couldn't be trusted to manage his own life. That version exists. It almost happened. What I know now that I wish I'd known earlier, if someone around you starts describing you as confused, struggling, not quite yourself, pay attention to who benefits from that description being true. Love doesn't usually look like paperwork, and generosity doesn't usually arrive already charged, already paired, already listening. I think about Dennis a lot, not in a dramatic way, just the way you think about a moment that could have gone the other way. He picked up those earbuds and looked at them the way a careful person looks at anything unfamiliar. He didn't assume they were fine. He didn't put them back down and say nothing. He saw something that didn't belong, and he told me the truth quietly in an ordinary office on an ordinary Wednesday morning. That decision, his decision, changed everything that came after. I've lived long enough to know that what happens to us is rarely random. Nadine didn't wake up one day and decide to do this out of nowhere. There were choices made over months, maybe years. Small ones at first, I imagine. A question here, a comment there, the kind of thing that seems harmless until you see where it was always pointing. Greed doesn't usually arrive all at once. It builds the way water erodes stone, slowly, steadily, in ways you don't notice until the damage is already done. And the thing that allowed it to build was the assumption that I wouldn't look closely enough. That I was trusting enough or distracted enough or old enough that I simply wouldn't see. That's the part that stays with me, not the anger, though there was anger. The part that stays is the recognition that I almost handed someone the tools to dismantle my life, because I thought love was the explanation for their behavior. I mistook politeness for warmth. I mistook a gift for generosity. I didn't look closely because looking closely felt like suspicion, and suspicion felt like a character flaw. It isn't. That's what I'd want anyone listening to understand. Paying attention to what's happening around you, really paying attention, not with paranoia, but with honesty, isn't a failure of trust. It's the most important thing you can do for yourself and for the people who genuinely depend on you. Bernadette looked at a document and read what it actually said, not what she hoped it said. Dennis looked at an earbud and asked a question most people wouldn't have thought to ask. Both of them used their minds carefully, without panic, without assumption. That's what I was missing, not suspicion, attention. What I also know now is that getting through something like this takes more than just noticing what's wrong. You have to keep moving after the noticing. Call the lawyer, go to the police station, change the passwords, update the documents. There's a version of me that finds out what Dennis found, feels sick about it, and then does nothing for 3 weeks because it's too overwhelming to act on. I understand that version of me. But that version loses everything. The version that acts, even imperfectly, even while still shaken, is the one that comes out the other side with his house, his pension, his name intact. I'm not a particularly philosophical man. I don't have a framework for all of this. What I have is 63 years of watching how things actually work, and what I've seen is that character isn't what you say about yourself. It's what you do when something is hard and frightening and unclear, and the easiest thing in the world would be to look away. I looked away for too long. I don't plan to make that mistake again. If someone in your life has started describing you as confused or struggling or not quite yourself, before you accept that description, ask who benefits from it being true.